America. Who really discovered the New World? The most straightforward answer would be Christopher Columbus, and the year would be famously stated as 1492. Was Columbus the first European to glimpse the untamed, verdant paradise that America must have been centuries ago? Those who have dug a little deeper would venture a guess that the Vikings were the ones to set foot on its shores first. And what is the first Viking name that would pop up in their head when it comes to the most famous Viking explorer? The most likely answer would be Leif Eriksson, the first to discover North America nearly 500 years before Columbus. Yet again, they will be wrong. This is the forgotten history of the man who didn't discover America. Between 1480 and 1780, European explorers discovered and mapped almost all of the world's seas, and they also outlined almost all continents, impelled by a variety of motives: trade, personal enrichment, glory, and by the 18th century, even scientific knowledge. Their legacy is today's world map, a common resource of all mankind. The European voyages of discovery began early in the 15th century, when Portuguese navigators advanced southward, round the west coast of Africa, in search of gold, slaves, and spices, until in 1487 Diaz and de Covija brought them into the Indian Ocean. Thenceforth, voyages of exploration multiplied, particularly after the resurgence of Islam made an old route to the east via Alexandria and the Red Sea precarious. While the Spanish sailed west, the Portuguese explored the eastern route to Asia. The Spanish search for a western route to the Spice Islands was less successful, but its unintended and momentous result was Columbus's discovery of the New World in 1492, followed by the Spanish conquest of the Americas. But it was not until after 1524, when Verrazano traced the coastline of North America as far north as Nova Scotia, that the existence of the new continent was generally accepted. Hundreds of years before these events, however, lived a man who had the potential to become a legend, yet made a seemingly small choice that changed the course of his life and human history as we know it. His name was Bjarni Herjolfsson, and he could have become one of the most famous explorers in history, if only he'd gotten out of his boat. This strange story of Bjarni Herjolfsson, a Viking who was short on curiosity, is told in the Saga of the Greenlanders, a Norse saga that was probably composed in the 13th or 14th century. Some 200 to 300 years after Bjarni Herjolfsson may have caught glimpses of the North American coastline from his ship. The saga is not the first account of European contact with the North American continent to be written. In about 1072, Adam of Bremen, a German monk, recorded information he had received from King Svein Estridsson, the king of the Danes. According to King Svein, another island existed to the far west of Greenland and Iceland. There, unknown crops also grow. Scholars today assume that Adam of Bremen was discussing the discovery of Vinland or Wineland by Norse explorers. The story of the Vikings in North America is a complex one. Over the past 50 years, linguists, archaeologists, historians, cartographers, and even YouTube experts have pieced together various clues which provide us with a better understanding of this story. But pieces of this story are, and probably always will be, incomplete. Further compounding the difficulties in understanding the story are the many contradictions that exist between the various texts discussing the Vikings' experiences in America. Bjarni's story, for example, is told in only one of the two Viking sagas about North America. In the saga of Eirik the Red, no mention is made of Bjarni, which has led some historians to ask if his journey to the west of Greenland even occurred, or if this guy existed. I mean, who is this guy? Do we have any pictures of him? Pull up the photographs. Where are they? You know, they're nowhere. Whether Bjarni Herjolfsson was the first European to see America, or whether this honor should be awarded to Leif Eriksson, will probably never be definitely answered. Bjarni's failure to land in North America was not simply a failure of the imagination. It has also meant that Bjarni and his crew failed to leave evidence of their journey for archaeologists to discover. But they did leave enough evidence for YouTubers to discover. Hjarolfsson was the son of Arson and his wife, who were early Norse settlers in Iceland. According to the Saga of the Greenlanders, that just sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? The Saga of the Greenlanders. Bjarni was a very promising man and someone who loved to travel. As a young man, he alternated between spending a winter abroad and a winter with his parents in Iceland. And that's about as much as we know about his early life. In the summer of 986, Hjarolfsson returned from a trip to Norway. He arrived in Eyjafjallajökull, Iceland, and learned his father had sailed with Eric the Red to Greenland with the intention of living there. Troubled by this news, Hjarolfsson refused to unload his cargo, stating to his crew that he intended to sail to Greenland and winter with his parents, as was his usual practice. His crew agreed to stay with him, and they began the voyage together. Bjarni was lost at sea, not even like a day later. On his way to Greenland, fierce autumn storms had buffeted his ship for days. They had blown him so far off course that he had no idea where he was. Once the weather cleared, the clouds disappeared, and the sun started shining, he was relieved to see land. But this land looked totally unfamiliar. It had no mountains or glaciers as Greenland did, only small hills and forests. Bjarni didn't know it, but he had crossed the Atlantic and sailed to what is now Canada. His crew begged him to land. If only he had the spirit of a Christopher Columbus. This might have been a defining moment in exploration, but Bjarni was intent on going home, not going down in history. So without even leaving his boat, he turned right around and headed out to sea. He and his crew finally made it to Greenland a week later. After reuniting with his father, Hjarolfsson decided to retire from his life as a sailor. He lived with his parents for the remainder of their lives, eventually inheriting his father's estate. Bjarni went down in history as the man whose curiosity did not get the better of him. Although he gave up his seafaring life, he could never shut up about the exotic land he discovered, writing about it in books and even telling people in Greenland about his journey. But no one really cared about his stories. When Bjarni's father died, he eventually sailed again, back to Norway and Iceland. It was believed that during this time, Leif Eriksson befriended Bjarni and heard about the story of the new lands. Then Bjarni sold his ship to Leif, who was eager to set sail. Leif Eriksson's crew at the time included 35 men, and Leif the Lucky became the first Norseman to set foot in North America, while Bjarni was forgotten by history. Scholars generally agreed that Hjarolfsson sighted Newfoundland, Labrador, and Baffin Island, though some argue that he strayed as far south as Maine, and when Maine is south, you got problems. About 15 years later, around 1000 CE, Leif Eriksson brought Hjarolfsson's ship and retraced his voyage, naming the lands Helluland, now known as Baffin Island, Markland, now known as Labrador, and Vinland, which is somewhere around the Gulf of the St. Lawrence. So, tell me in the comments, who do you think should get the credit for discovering the Americas? Peace.
Check out the featured comment below, subscribe for more World Unearthed, and I'll see you in the next video.